Hello there, YouTube. I'm the LonChaneyReviewer, and today is not a Silent Film Saturday episode, but interestingly enough, I will be talking about a mute-talkie, which means it's partly silent but also partly talkie. And that film, my friends, is Modern Times. Now, this is part of my favorite film series. This is my third favorite film of all time, and it also makes it my favorite Chaplin film. And I will explain why. Right about... Okay, so let me describe the plot to you for this film. We have Chaplin as a factory worker who suffers from a nervous breakdown in a factory, and he struggles to find life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a very capitalist, dehumanizing world. And along the way he meets a young woman named the Gamine, played by Paulette Goddard, who would become Chaplin's third wife and also co-star with him on The Great Dictator. And the rest of the film is about them trying to find happiness and jobs. And I like that. That's a very basic framework, and that's exactly why I love this movie. Keaton fans and Chaplin fans may note that both Chaplin and Keaton had very different storytelling sensibilities. Chaplin did his films like two-reelers, multiple two-reelers in one film, whereas Keaton filmed it for the entire film. You know, it was like, it made a logical progression from one end of the film to another, whereas Chaplin, it's connected, not loosely, but, you know, not fully connected with a story. And that's what I like about this film, is that there's a loose story, but it never loses sight of the characters. And that should be that's the most important element in a film sometimes. Sometimes films are too story-driven and you just don't care about the characters. And this film is, you know, is more concerned with its characters and where they're going to end up, how they're going to be, if they're going to get in danger or trouble or get separated. You really care about the characters. And that's partly because it's not just centered on a story, it's centered on the characters. And you need to see a lot of movies to understand what I'm trying to convey with that point. But if you do, that's cool. But what's really great about this movie is that, at least in the very beginning and some parts towards the second and third act of the film, it criticizes capitalism and the assembly line. And Chaplin, you know, most famous scene in this film is Chaplin going through the gears. You know, he's become part of the machine. He becomes part of the system. And he's become so mentally unstable that he goes crazy in the film. Like, well, people debate whether this is the Tramp or not. To me, it's the Tramp. In fact, you can make an argument that that Chaplin's playing the Tramp all the way up to Limelight. I've seen people make that argument. And actually, in the panel coming up in Italy next year, that's one of the potential topics there might talk about, or people could talk about, is the fact that what was Chaplin's last appearance as the Tramp? And I like to hear your thoughts on that below. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. But the story, you know, Chaplin is concerned with this character. This character is getting dehumanized. He's breaking down. He's using his wrenches to hurt people, and it's hurting himself because he loses that job from there. Now he has to look for another one. But the thing is, whenever he gets in trouble, he likes it. And the reason for that is sometimes being in jail in certain economic times is better than being out on the street. Because at least in jail, you get food, and you have a bed. The street doesn't always have that. So it's interesting because Chaplin, as always, taking this from a strictly human point of view, is like, it's kind of sad where we live in the greatest country in the world, and some people would rather go to jail than, you know, have a home of their own, because at least with jail, they're going to be guaranteed to get food, guaranteed to get shelter. And that's Chaplin's trying. In the film, there are actually numerous occasions where Chaplin wants to get in jail. In fact, there's a really great scene in the film where Chaplin goes to a buffet, I guess, and he puts everything he could possibly eat on this gigantic football tray. He eats it, brings his check to the counter, he brings over a cop and says, arrest me, basically. And he, not only that, when the cop has him outside, he takes a couple cigarettes. Why? Because he's gonna get food, he's gonna get shelter. So it's a funny sequence, but at the same time it's quite tragic, hitting on that element that Chaplin was always so good with, hitting on the comedic elements and the tragic elements of a character or a film. Now you also have Paulette Goddard, which, to my estimation, might be the best Chaplin supporting character. The reason being, she's not, an inferior character. She has much to do with the plot as the tramp does in this film. The gamine gets a job, she makes the food, and she has her own ambitions. She's her own separate character. She isn't just, oh, I'm just a romantic interest for the tramp. And I don't think she's not a romantic interest for the tramp. They're just sidekicks. They're buddies. They're really good friends. And they just want to look out for each other. And I like that. And I believe David Robinson said this, but she's kind of like a distant cousin to Jackie Coogan's Kid character, another great Chaplin supporting character who is their own character, but works together with Chaplin, and you end up caring more about the tramp, I feel, in this film, because you have a character like the gamine or the kid. Now, like I said earlier, this is a mute-talkie, meaning it lives in the world of silence but flirts with dialogue. And in the beginning of the film, it's interesting. At this point, I had never seen a film like this. This is one of the most unique films, in my opinion, ever, because it's a silent film, but at the same time, there is dialogue. And the dialogue, in the beginning of the film at least, comes from the machines. The dialogue comes from anything that's like a telephone or a radio, a transmitter, not television screen, but like there's screens in the film and characters were communicating through them. And I felt that was so interesting, and so it plays to the theme that characters in a silent film don't get a chance to scream for help. It makes me think of Roger Ebert, the late great Roger Ebert's review of Nosferatu, and the reason why Nosferatu is scary, at the end of his review, he says the characters are in a silent world and they don't get to scream for help. And that's kind of like this world. This world, everybody else gets, all the machines, everything mechanical and inhuman gets to speak, whereas the human beings are not allowed to say a word. At least until the end of the film. But I'm not going to say anything more about that because that would be spoiling a lot of elements. Oops. Then you have the music in the film, which I think is one of Chaplin's most complicated and wonderful scores. And as Timothy Brock said on the interview for the Gold Rush, he loves that score because it's so challenging. And I would imagine it would be challenging. And the sad thing is, with 1930s technology, we're only hearing about 70% of that score. So when they do like a live recording of modern times with like a live orchestra, except for certain scenes, of course, then it's like you get to hear the full impact of that score. And even with just what they had in 1936, this is an impressive score because there's so much going on. And I think that was what Chaplin was trying to make the point of. Everything is just so hair-raising and so stressful and just downright inhuman, and the score is just going too fast for you to comprehend all of the elements. I might be overanalyzing the score just a tad, but I love it for those reasons, and I wish I had, maybe in the future I might get a soundtrack of Modern Times onto my iPod, because I do enjoy that score, and I have a snippet of the Modern Times score on my iPod thanks to the Carl Davis Chaplin record, where he does re-recordings of certain pieces of music like The Kid, City Lights, Great Dictator, Modern Times, and also does like the music for the Mutual films like The Rink or The Floorwalker. So where does this stand in Chaplin's filmography? Well, this is between City Lights and The Great Dictator. It came out in 1936, and Chaplin was in his late 40s when he made this film. And this was, some people like to say this was the first film where Chaplin was politically aware. You can make an argument that that was even earlier, like with The Immigrant. Chaplin was always one of those figures that, for one reason or another, he was always politically aware. And he portrayed it in a very humanistic way. Social human way. And it works so well in this film. That's what I like about this film, is that I'm trying to think of other comedic sequences that I love. I love the Billows feeding machine. That, to me, was one of the most hilarious sequences in film comedy. It just escalates to it just builds and builds and builds and escalates to a point where it's just like, are you kidding me? Another scene, I mean, there's just so many. When Chaplin's doing like the roller skating in the store, Chaplin, you know, people accidentally think he's a communist, which is ironic. There's just a lot of great sequences, and the fact of the matter is, it's all about the characters. It's not just about the story. It's about these two characters who all they want to do is just find happiness. And it's simple, but it's still relevant for today. I mean, if you look at the title Modern Times, it's a very vague title. It can mean any time. Yes, Chaplin is putting this in the context of the Great Depression, but this could be for today or any other time of harsh unemployment. So I believe Modern Times is a very, very fresh look at capitalism, factories, assembly line, unemployment, happiness, and is just funny. It's an entertaining movie as well, and it's a perfect length. I think this and City Lights and The Gold Rush, they're like all about like 87, 86, 88 minutes long. And to me, you don't really want to go that much longer with a comedy. Very few comedies, in my opinion, work beyond 2 hours. That's just my opinion. But this film is hilarious, and this would be Chaplin's transition film from silence to talkies. It was the transition film, whereas The Great Dictator was the definite first talkie. This was kind of like the precursor, and City Lights was the major farewell. This was like saying goodbye, and then you're approaching your new stage of your life. So, comment below, guys. Tell me what you think of Modern Times, Charlie Chaplin, the characters in Modern Times, you know, whatever. And then this week, I'm also going to review Monsieur Verdoux, and for Silent Film Saturday, I'm going to review the 1928 Chaplin film, The Circus. See you guys later.